I survived 3 divorces. Here's what I learned about love. Elon Musk. Part 1. The screen flickers with his voice, steady, low, thoughtful. Love is not what people think. It is not just romance, not just fireworks. It's a bond that tests you, breaks you, reshapes you. I've failed at it, more than once. But each failure taught me something deeper, something raw about the human heart and the way we connect. I want to share that with you. Because survival is not just about rockets or Mars. Survival is also about love. Those words, carrying the unmistakable tone of Elon Musk, open the floodgate to a journey very few dare to narrate publicly. A man known for building rockets, cars, tunnels, satellites, a man known for dreaming at a scale beyond Earth itself, now standing vulnerable, speaking of the quiet battlefield no one truly sees, his heart. He doesn't start with victory. He starts with survival. And as the narrative begins, the tension between human fragility and unshakable ambition threads itself through every moment. Imagine being one of the most recognized innovators in the world. Your time is split between SpaceX launches, Tesla engineering meetings, Neuralink breakthroughs, Starlink deployments, and countless bold visions for the future. Now add marriage. Add love. Add the constant need to show up emotionally, when your brain is wired to be building bridges to Mars. This is where Elon admits, love has been his most complex engineering problem. 3 divorces. Each one leaving scars invisible to the world but sharp enough to carve lessons into his very spirit. This is not a pity tale, this is an unveiling. The first divorce introduced him to the reality of mismatch, when dreams and daily life cannot live in the same room. He recalls the long nights of coding, of designing, of burning himself into his work. Love requires presence, yet ambition often steals presence away. He remembers the silence of dinners where words fell flat, because his mind was still orbiting Saturn while his partner wanted earthly connection. The second divorce brought him face to face with vulnerability. Here, Elon discovered that success cannot guarantee harmony. You may have billions, but when your heart is restless, when your insecurities rise, when your past haunts you, money builds no shield. The unraveling was painful, not because there wasn't love, but because love was not enough when wounds went untreated. The third divorce. That was survival in its rawest form. By then, he had seen patterns in himself, in others, in the dynamics of how humans fall in love and fall apart. He speaks of it not as tragedy, but as revelation. Survival after the third felt like walking through fire and realizing you still breathe, still hope, still dare to search for meaning in connection. And so this journey begins, not in despair, but in illumination. Elon Musk learned that love is not a destination, it is an experiment. And experiments demand failures, iterations, resilience, and a willingness to face discomfort. When you strip away the headlines, the wealth, the myth, what remains is a man who longs for connection, who longs for someone to share the silence of space with, someone who understands that even visionaries ache for warmth. He admits, he never stopped believing in love. Even after 3 divorces, he never allowed bitterness to calcify into cynicism. That's the first lesson, love is not ruined by failure. Love is tested by failure. And those who keep their hearts open after loss, those are the ones who truly understand its worth. As the words sink in, you feel the weight of his vulnerability. Elon Musk, who built rockets to escape gravity, cannot escape the gravity of human emotion. That is the paradox. And it is within this paradox that the script unfolds, revealing layer after layer of what he discovered, not from textbooks, not from algorithms, but from bruises of the heart. The story does not flow like a lecture. It flows like a confession. And within it, we, the listeners, begin to see fragments of our own heartbreaks, our own losses, our own survival. For love is the one arena where no one escapes unscathed. He speaks about the hunger for companionship, the quiet fear of loneliness, the need to balance obsession with empathy. He recalls moments where he gave too little, moments where he gave too much, moments where he expected perfection, and moments where he accepted chaos. Each divorce was not the end of love but the beginning of deeper awareness. What does a man who dreams of colonizing Mars truly crave in love? Not grandeur. Not wealth. Not admiration. What he craves is simplicity, an embrace that makes him forget the weight of galaxies. Someone who looks at him not as the CEO, not as the billionaire, not as the genius, but as a man who sometimes feels small, sometimes feels lost, sometimes feels afraid. And through these cracks in his voice, we discover a truth: even the most powerful are fragile when it comes to love. Even Elon Musk, who pushes humanity forward, seeks someone to hold him back from drowning in solitude. He recalls nights after his divorces when silence felt heavier than failure. He could launch rockets, but he couldn't silence the echo in his own home. That echo taught him something invaluable: love is not a luxury. Love is oxygen. And when it is gone, you suffocate in ways no machine can measure. So what did he learn? That love cannot be engineered like a spacecraft. It cannot be scaled like a company. It must be nurtured in stillness, protected in the moments no one tweets about, guarded in the quiet gestures that seem small but mean everything. His words stretch beyond personal survival. They reach into us, reminding us of our own need to survive heartbreak, to not allow the collapse of a relationship to define the collapse of ourselves. He survived 3 divorces. But more importantly, he survived himself, the part of him that wanted to quit on love, the part that whispered loneliness is safer. And by surviving, he teaches us that resilience in love is as vital as resilience in science. This is only the beginning. His message is not complete, for lessons are not learned in a single story. They unfold, layer by layer, across the experiences that break us and rebuild us. And so, as this script opens, we lean closer. Because what follows is not just Elon Musk's journey, it is a mirror into our own. Part 2. The silence after his first divorce still lingers in Elon's memory like the echo of a rocket long after launch. The world only saw headlines: Elon Musk divorces, billionaire split, the typical media frenzy that thrives on surface-level drama. But they never saw the inside story, the sleepless nights, the long drives where he asked himself questions with no answers, the way even success in the outside world could not quiet the storm inside. He admits now, in a tone both soft and steady, that the first divorce was the most disorienting. Not because it was the greatest love he lost, but because it was the first time he realized that brilliance in one arena does not guarantee brilliance in another. You can be a master of engineering, a strategist in business, a visionary in science, but none of that trains you for the complexity of human connection. Love is not logic. It is not mathematics. It is not code you can debug with a patch. It is living, breathing, shifting, and unpredictable. And so he learned the hard way, he could not simply outthink love. He remembers clearly, the house felt bigger than ever after that first separation. A place once full of laughter, arguments, shared meals, and plans now turned into rooms heavy with silence. That silence was louder than any rocket engine he had ever built. But instead of rejecting the pain, Elon forced himself to sit with it. He wanted to understand, not just what went wrong, but why. Why do humans crave connection so deeply? Why is it that we can build everything, machines, cities, even rockets to Mars, and yet still feel incomplete without someone by our side? The lesson began to take shape. Love is not about efficiency. It is about presence. His first marriage taught him that love cannot survive if it always comes second to ambition. Ambition may feed your dreams, but love feeds your soul. Without balance, one will always devour the other. He confesses that he tried to give everything to both, his work and his marriage, but in truth, he gave too much to one and too little to the other. You cannot split yourself endlessly without consequence. That realization burned into him after the first divorce, but the deeper lessons were still waiting. The second divorce arrived like a storm that he saw coming but couldn't avoid. By then, he had already built more success, already carried more weight on his shoulders, already felt the pull of destiny in his mission for humanity. But love, again, demanded something he couldn't easily give: vulnerability. Here, he discovered something he had long resisted: being vulnerable does not make you weak. In fact, it is the only way to let someone truly know you. He admits he often hid his struggles, thinking that strength meant never showing fear, never showing exhaustion, never showing the cracks. But love is built on transparency, not perfection. When you hide your scars, you also hide your humanity. The unraveling of his second marriage forced him to face parts of himself he had buried: the insecurities, the loneliness, the fear of being unlovable despite all he had accomplished. He says it quietly now, almost as if whispering to himself as much as to us: you can build rockets to Mars, but you can't launch away from your own pain. In the end, the second divorce wasn't just a separation from a partner, it was a confrontation with his own reflection. And though it hurt, it stripped him of illusions. It taught him that love is not sustained by wealth, not sustained by genius, not even sustained by shared goals. Love is sustained by courage, the courage to be fully seen. The third divorce, however, was different. By then, Elon was no longer shocked by the collapse of a relationship. He had grown accustomed to the way love can start like a supernova and collapse into a black hole. But this one left him with a strange gift: acceptance. He remembers waking up one morning after the final separation, the room once again heavy with silence, but this time something inside him shifted. Instead of resisting, instead of fighting, instead of replaying the mistakes endlessly, he accepted it. He accepted that love is not guaranteed. He accepted that sometimes even your best effort cannot hold two people together. He accepted that failure in love is not the same as failure in life. This acceptance freed him in a way nothing else had. He began to see love not as a problem to solve but as a journey to walk. And journeys, by their nature, have both beginnings and endings. He leans forward in his seat, his voice steady now. The greatest thing I learned after 3 divorces is this: love is not about ownership. It is about experience. Each person you love teaches you something no one else can. Each heartbreak gives you wisdom you cannot learn in comfort. Each ending prepares you for a deeper beginning. Love is not wasted, even if it ends. Think about that for a moment. In a world where we are taught to measure love by how long it lasts, Elon Musk reframes it entirely. Love is measured by how deeply it transforms you. And in that measure, even failed marriages are not failures, they are milestones on the path to understanding. He reflects on the universal human desire to not be alone. He admits openly, he hates being alone. Loneliness, for him, is more suffocating than failure. And yet, after each divorce, he was forced to sit with loneliness until it became his teacher. From loneliness, he learned to listen to himself more deeply. He learned what he truly needed, not just what he thought he wanted. He learned that love should not be sought as a cure for emptiness, but as a partnership between two whole people. This is where the survival turns into growth. Elon Musk's 3 divorces broke him open, but in breaking, they revealed truths that no book, no lecture, no theory could have taught him. They revealed that love is not a fairy tale. Love is a practice. It is imperfect, messy, and sometimes heartbreaking, but it is also the most powerful force that keeps humanity alive. And so he speaks not as a man defeated by love, but as a man who has learned from it, who still believes in it, who still seeks it, not because he is naive, but because he knows that life without love is no life at all. The camera lingers on his face for a moment. You can see the weight of experience, the softness of vulnerability, the resilience of someone who has been through fire and still chooses to walk forward. This is what survival looks like. Not untouched, not unscarred, but unbroken in spirit. And it is this spirit that carries him into the next chapter, where the lessons grow sharper, the reflections deeper, and the meaning of love more profound. Because the story doesn't end with loss. It never does. The story always continues, as long as the heart continues to beat. Part 3. There's a moment Elon often recalls, not a launch, not an invention, but a quiet evening when everything felt unbearably heavy. The house was silent again, yet this time the silence was almost familiar. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at his phone, scrolling through endless messages, yet feeling completely disconnected. Friends congratulated him on achievements, media blasted his name across headlines, fans celebrated his innovations. And still, none of it filled the space left by absence. It was in that emptiness that he understood something simple but profound: success without love feels incomplete. You can achieve everything you once dreamed of, and still, when the lights go off, the emptiness speaks louder than applause. He admits he's chased both, success and love. He didn't want to choose one over the other. But life kept reminding him that balance is fragile, and ambition often tips the scales. The lesson wasn't about giving up ambition, it was about redefining what love really needs. Love, he realized, doesn't ask for perfection. It doesn't need constant grand gestures, nor does it need wealth or fame. What it does need is attention, the kind of attention that says, I see you. I hear you. You matter, right here, right now. In each marriage, he thought he was giving enough. But looking back, he knows he gave fragments. His body was present, but his mind often drifted into orbit, literally, into thoughts of engines, orbits, propulsion, timelines. And he now sees how damaging that can be. Because love cannot be lived on autopilot. Love demands presence. That realization came late, and it cost him. Yet it also shaped him. He says it with a clarity that can only come from scars: if you're not fully present in love, you're not really in it. He learned another truth through his divorces: people change, and love must evolve with them. Relationships collapse not just from betrayal or neglect, but often from a failure to grow together. He recalls times when he grew rapidly, career exploding, vision expanding, while his partner grew in a different direction. At first, it seemed manageable. But with time, the gap widened, and neither could bridge it. Growth, he realized, is beautiful, but it can also be dangerous. If two people aren't intentional about staying aligned, love can dissolve quietly, almost invisibly, until one day you wake up and realize you're strangers in the same home. He shares this not as blame, but as insight. He acknowledges his own role in the widening gap. He didn't always make space for his partner's growth, didn't always pause to listen, didn't always slow down enough to nurture the bond. Ambition kept him running, but love sometimes needs stillness. Stillness, he repeats that word as if testing it on his tongue. It's something he didn't value enough. He thought productivity was the key to everything. But in love, stillness is the soil where connection grows. A simple evening walk, a shared meal without distractions, a conversation without rushing, those small acts create roots deeper than any grand success. 3 divorces taught him this lesson with painful clarity: love dies when stillness is absent. He pauses, his voice softer now. He admits that after his 3rd divorce, he started questioning himself in a way he never had before. Was he even capable of love? Was something in him broken beyond repair? Or was love simply not compatible with a life driven by such enormous vision? He remembers nights staring at the ceiling, grappling with those questions. Doubt crept in, and for a while, it consumed him. But then, slowly, another realization emerged: love is not about being perfect, nor is it about having endless time. Love is about intention. Even in small doses, if intention is genuine, it can sustain connection. That understanding became a kind of hope for him. He began to believe that love, even if fragile, is always possible, if nurtured with honesty and care. There's another lesson he shares, one most people avoid talking about: love requires failure. Not just the big failures that end marriages, but the small daily failures: misunderstandings, impatience, selfishness, neglect. Every relationship experiences them. The difference between those that survive and those that collapse is whether both partners are willing to learn from those failures. In his own journey, Elon admits he didn't always learn quickly enough. Sometimes pride delayed his growth. Sometimes exhaustion kept him from trying harder. But each failure carved another reminder into his heart: humility sustains love more than brilliance ever will. Humility, that's a word not often associated with him. The world sees Elon Musk as bold, confident, relentless. And in his work, he is. But in love, he's learned, humility is essential. The ability to say, "I was wrong. I hurt you. I need to do better." Without those words, even the strongest bond will eventually crack. When he reflects on love now, he no longer sees it as something fragile to be feared, nor as something guaranteed to last forever. He sees it as a sacred opportunity, a chance to walk beside another soul, however long the journey may be. And this reframing keeps him hopeful. Even after 3 divorces, he has not closed the door. He still believes. Not in perfect love, but in real love, the kind that is messy, imperfect, and yet deeply human. He admits, too, that part of his longing for love is tied to legacy. Rockets, cars, companies, those will shape history. But love shapes memory. It shapes the way your children remember you, the way your partner remembers you, the way your own heart feels at the end of a long day. Without love, legacy feels incomplete. He survived the pain, the loss, the self-doubt. But survival, he says, is not the ultimate goal. Thriving is. And thriving, to him, means continuing to risk love, even after heartbreak. Continuing to open his heart, even when logic warns against it. Continuing to believe that no matter how many times love breaks you, it always remains worth chasing. This is the paradox of his life. He builds machines to defy gravity, and yet, love, the most natural force of all, remains the hardest to master. But he no longer sees that as failure. He sees it as a reminder that love is the one arena where all humans are equal. Billionaire or not, genius or not, we all ache the same. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson of all: love humbles us into our shared humanity. The story continues, not as a conclusion, but as a winding path forward. Because survival is only the first step. After survival comes the rebuilding. And in that rebuilding, he carries with him the scars of 3 divorces, not as burdens, but as maps guiding him toward a love that is deeper, wiser, and truer than before. Part 4. There are memories that still sting, even now. Elon recalls walking away from courtrooms, from lawyers' offices, from long conversations that ended with silence rather than reconciliation. Each time, there was a strange mix of grief and relief. Grief for the love that had ended, relief that the struggle was no longer daily. And in that tension between loss and release, he began to see something important. Love is not always about holding on, sometimes it is about letting go. Letting go was not easy for him. He is a man who builds, who fixes, who refuses to accept failure in his work. Rockets may explode, but he builds another. Cars may crash, but he engineers improvements. In his world, nothing is permanent failure. Yet in love, he discovered that sometimes the bravest act is to accept that it is over. He describes love like fire. When tended carefully, it gives warmth, light, and comfort. But when it fades, no matter how tightly you try to grasp the smoke, you cannot force it back into flame. He tried, oh, he tried. But love cannot be forced into survival. It must live freely or not at all. Through his divorces, Elon realized something crucial: clinging to love out of fear of loneliness only deepens the wound. You must release with dignity when the time has come. That release, though painful, is also liberating. It allows space for healing, for growth, and perhaps, one day, for love to return in a new form. After his third divorce, he reached a point of reflection that changed everything. He started to ask not, "Why did love fail me?" but instead, "What did love teach me?" This shift in perspective altered the way he saw his past. Instead of labeling the divorces as mistakes, he began to see them as lessons disguised in heartbreak. The first marriage taught him presence. The second taught him vulnerability. The third taught him acceptance. Together, they gave him a framework for understanding love more deeply than success ever could. He says softly, "Pain is a teacher. It doesn't just break you, it rebuilds you differently. If you allow it, heartbreak can sculpt you into someone wiser, more compassionate, more ready for love than before." This isn't just his story, it's the story of humanity. Every person who has loved and lost has walked this path. And by sharing his, Elon reminds us that we are not alone in our struggles. Billionaire or not, genius or not, we all endure the same ache when love falters. He reflects on the paradox of his own life. He builds rockets meant to conquer distance, yet in love, he struggled to bridge the smallest gaps between two hearts. He builds machines that defy physics, yet his own emotions often defied logic. He builds futures for humanity, yet struggled to build a stable present for himself. But through it all, one truth emerged: love is not a problem to be solved. It is a mystery to be lived. And mysteries do not need solutions, they need devotion. That shift changed how he sees love now. He no longer approaches it with the mindset of control. Instead, he sees it as surrender. Surrender to unpredictability. Surrender to vulnerability. Surrender to the risk of being hurt again, knowing that the reward, true connection, is worth it. He admits something few expect from him: he is not afraid of failure in love anymore. Failure in love is not shameful. What is shameful is closing the heart and refusing to try again. That, he says, would be a greater loss than any divorce. As he speaks, you feel the quiet resilience in his words. This is not the Elon Musk of press conferences or product launches. This is the Elon Musk who has been broken and still chooses to believe. And belief is powerful. He believes love is still out there for him. Not because he is Elon Musk, not because of wealth or fame, but because he is human. And being human means being wired for love. It is not optional, it is essential. He remembers moments of tenderness across his marriages. The laughter, the shared dreams, the small comforts of being seen. Those memories remain, even after the marriage is ended. And they remind him that love was real, even if it didn't last forever. That realization changed the way he values relationships. A love that ends is not a love that was false. It was real while it existed. It mattered. This reframing gave him peace. It allowed him to let go of bitterness and hold on to gratitude instead. Gratitude for what love gave, even if it didn't give permanence. Gratitude for the way it shaped him, softened him, humbled him. He leans back, almost as if speaking to himself, every person I loved, I still carry in me. Not as regret, but as part of who I am. It's a reminder to all of us. The people we have loved, whether they stayed or left, whether it ended with joy or pain, live within us. They change us, teach us, and in many ways, never truly leave. Elon survived 3 divorces, but survival alone is not the story. The story is what survival revealed, that love is worth the risk, worth the pain, worth the endless attempts. Because love is not measured by how many times it breaks you, but by how many times you rise to seek it again. And in this rising, there is hope. For Elon, for anyone who has loved and lost, the path forward is not closed. The heart, once broken, can still beat stronger than before. He ends this part of his reflection with a line that lingers like an echo: I'd rather risk heartbreak 1,000 times than live without love once. The screen fades slightly, leaving us with that truth. It's not about the scars we carry, it's about the courage to keep searching, even with scars. Part 5. There was a night when Elon found himself staring out of a hotel window, far from home, far from the people he cared about. He had just finished a meeting, his phone was buzzing with endless notifications, but in that quiet moment, he realized how profoundly alone he felt. He could be surrounded by teams, investors, engineers, and admirers, and yet none of them could fill the ache of companionship that was missing. Loneliness is not the absence of people, he realized. It is the absence of connection. And that absence cannot be filled with noise, or distractions, or even success. Only love, real love, can quiet the ache. This realization led him to confront one of the most difficult truths about himself: he had often confused intensity with intimacy. His life was full of intensity, intense work, intense goals, intense conversations about the future of humanity. But intimacy is different. Intimacy is soft, quiet, slow. It asks not for intensity, but for patience. It is not about solving problems, but about sharing presence. He admits, with a trace of regret, that in his marriages, he sometimes struggled to switch gears. He could move from a rocket launch to a high-stakes boardroom meeting in the same day, but moving from intensity to intimacy was harder than any launch. His mind was trained to sprint, but love requires you to sit, breathe, and simply be. That was one of his deepest lessons: love does not demand brilliance, it demands presence. And presence, he realized, is often harder to give than money or ideas. After his 3rd divorce, Elon began to reflect more deeply on what love really is. Not in the abstract, not in the idealized way, but in the lived, raw, human sense. He began to write down thoughts, sometimes in the middle of the night, about what he believed love should look like. Those notes were not for the world, they were for himself, reminders of what truly matters. He wrote, "Love is when silence feels safe, not empty. Love is when flaws don't scare you, but draw you closer. Love is when presence feels more valuable than perfection." Those words became mantras for him, guiding the way he thought about future relationships. They helped him reframe his view. Love is not about grand gestures, but about consistency. Love is not about avoiding conflict, but about handling conflict with respect. Love is not about finding someone perfect, but about building something imperfect together with honesty. He pauses as he shares this, almost as if letting the weight of those truths settle into the air. Another lesson emerged in those reflective months: love is not about rescue. For years, Elon admitted, he had subconsciously sought someone who could rescue him from his loneliness, someone who could fill the gaps in his restless soul. But love cannot be built on rescue. That is too much weight to place on another person. It is not fair, and it always collapses under the pressure. Instead, he learned, love is about partnership. Two whole people, walking side by side, supporting each other, but not expecting the other to heal every wound. Healing is personal. Partnership is shared. This shift changed everything for him. It meant he no longer sought love as a cure, but as a companion. Not to fill emptiness, but to walk with him through fullness and emptiness alike. He also began to see that his divorces were not just about what went wrong, they were also about what went right. For in each marriage, there were moments of beauty, laughter, growth, and joy. To dismiss them as failures would be to dishonor the truth of what was real. He remembers vividly a time when he and his partner laughed until tears rolled down their faces, over something trivial, something meaningless, yet utterly human. Those moments still matter, even if the marriage ended. Love does not lose its value just because it was temporary. He repeats it clearly: temporary does not mean meaningless. This realization softened him, made him more grateful, more compassionate. It taught him that the goal of love is not always forever. Sometimes the goal of love is simply to teach, to heal, to awaken, and then to let go. And that is not failure, it is life. He reflects too on the way the world often judges people for failed marriages, especially public figures. Headlines reduce the complexity of human relationships into sound bites, as if love were as simple as winning or losing. But love is never that simple. Love is a universe unto itself, with galaxies of memories, constellations of lessons, and black holes of grief. No headline could ever capture its depth. This is why he chooses to speak openly about his divorces, not as shame, but as survival. By surviving, he gives permission for others to see love not as something you either win or lose, but as something you live, something you learn, something that reshapes you with every experience. And perhaps the most surprising thing he shares is this: despite 3 divorces, despite heartbreak, despite the public scrutiny, he still believes in love. Not just in theory, but in practice. He still seeks it, still hopes for it, still longs for it. Because to him, a life without love is no life at all. He knows the risks. He knows he could face another heartbreak, another ending. But he also knows that love, even fleeting, is worth it. It gives life color, texture, meaning. Without it, even Mars would feel empty. He smiles faintly as he reflects on this: we can colonize planets, but what's the point if we can't share them with someone we love? That line lingers, because it speaks to something universal. Success, exploration, achievement, all of it feels hollow if not shared. And this is perhaps his greatest revelation: love is not an accessory to life. It is the essence of life. Even after 3 divorces, he holds on to hope. Not naive hope, but seasoned hope. Hope that is aware of pain, yet stronger because of it. Hope that has walked through fire and still chooses to believe. He ends this reflection with words that could apply to anyone listening: love is the hardest thing I've ever tried. Harder than rockets, harder than Tesla, harder than Mars. But it's also the most important. And no matter how many times it breaks me, I will keep trying. Because without love, nothing else truly matters. The camera holds on his face for a long moment, letting the silence say what words cannot. The silence is not empty this time, it is full. Full of resilience. Full of hope. Full of the quiet truth that even in heartbreak, love remains the greatest pursuit. Part 6. There comes a point, Elon admits, when pain becomes a teacher in ways you never asked for but deeply need. After his 3rd divorce, the silence in his life grew louder than ever. Not the silence of peace, but the silence that presses against your chest, the kind that feels heavier than sound. He would walk into rooms that used to echo with laughter, and now they felt hollow. For many nights, he would bury himself in work, checking designs, reviewing launch schedules, rewriting plans for Mars colonization. But no matter how much work he poured himself into, the silence waited for him at the end of the day. He discovered that you cannot outwork loneliness. You cannot outrun the ache of a heart that longs for connection. So, slowly, almost reluctantly, he began to sit with his own solitude. At first, it was unbearable. He described it as staring into a mirror you don't want to face. But with time, the solitude became less of an enemy and more of a companion. He learned to be alone without being lonely. He learned that healing requires space. And in that space, he began to rediscover parts of himself he had neglected. For so long, he had been the engineer, the visionary, the CEO, the public figure. But underneath all of that, he was still human, a man who felt deeply, who feared deeply, who hoped deeply. One of the most profound realizations he shares is this: survival after divorce is not just about moving on from someone else. It is about moving back into yourself. It is about returning to the parts of you that got lost in the noise, in the chaos, in the attempt to hold something together that was already breaking. He admits he had lost pieces of himself in the process of trying to keep love alive. He gave so much that he forgot to ask, who am I when I am not giving? Who am I when I am not fixing? Who am I when I am simply being? The answers did not come quickly, but they came. He began to enjoy quiet walks again. He began to laugh at small things, not because someone else brought the laughter, but because joy returned on its own. He began to write more, private thoughts, reflections, letters he would never send. Writing became his therapy, his way of making sense of the storm inside. He also found comfort in the innocence of his children. Spending time with them reminded him that love can be simple, unconditional, uncalculated. Children don't care about net worth or rocket launches or headlines. They care if you are present. They care if you look them in the eyes when they speak. They care if you hold their hand. That reminder grounded him more than any boardroom meeting could. One evening, he recalls sitting with his children, watching a movie together. As they laughed at something on the screen, he realized that love does not always need to be complicated. Sometimes love is simply showing up, being there, and letting the moment breathe. That truth stayed with him. And yet, healing was not a straight line. There were days when the loneliness returned like a storm, when he felt the sharp ache of what was lost. But instead of drowning in it, he began to treat those moments as waves. A wave may knock you down, but it always passes. And once it passes, you stand up again. He emphasizes this for anyone listening: healing is not about never feeling pain again. Healing is about learning to live with pain in a way that no longer controls you. Pain may visit, but it no longer owns the house. During this period, Elon also began to reflect more deeply on the meaning of commitment. For years, he believed commitment was about holding on no matter what. But now he sees that true commitment is not about staying at any cost, it is about showing up fully while it lasts. And when it can no longer last, commitment means honoring the truth rather than living a lie. This was not a surrender to failure, but a surrender to honesty. And in honesty, there is freedom. He recalls a conversation he once had with a close friend who asked him, "Do you still believe in marriage after all this?" Elon paused for a long time before answering. Finally, he said, "I believe in love. And if marriage can hold it, then yes, I believe. But if love is gone, marriage alone cannot save it." That distinction became a guiding principle for him. Marriage, like any structure, is only as strong as the love that lives inside it. Without love, it becomes an empty shell. But with love, it can be a sanctuary. These reflections also reshaped the way he approached relationships after his divorces. He stopped chasing the illusion of perfection. He no longer looked for someone to complete him. Instead, he began to seek someone to walk alongside him, someone who understood that he was whole already but still human, still flawed, still learning. Perhaps the most surprising lesson he shares is that love is not just romantic. Love is everywhere if you choose to see it. Love is in the smile of a child, the loyalty of a friend, the kindness of a stranger. Love is in the moments when someone listens without judgment, when someone shows up without being asked. This broader view of love expanded his capacity to heal. It reminded him that even if romantic love ends, love itself does not disappear. Love transforms, love shifts, love finds new expressions. And with that realization, he began to rebuild hope. Not naive hope, but hope rooted in reality. He did not expect love to be easy, nor did he expect it to be perfect. He only expected it to be real. He speaks of hope with a quiet strength now, as though it has been reforged in fire. Hope that once felt fragile now feels unshakable, because it has been tested. He tells those who are listening, don't let heartbreak convince you that love isn't worth it. Don't let divorce trick you into believing you failed. You haven't failed. You've lived. And love, even when it breaks, is proof that your heart was alive. Those words linger, because they carry the weight of someone who has lived them. They carry the voice of someone who knows both the cost of love and its value. By the end of this reflection, Elon sits back, quieter now, but lighter too. There is a gentleness in his expression, as if the storm has passed and he can finally see the sky again. The silence that follows is not heavy anymore. It is the silence of peace, the silence that comes when a man has faced himself and chosen to keep going. He closes with a reminder that is both simple and profound: I survived my divorces not by forgetting love, but by remembering it. And no matter what happens, I will always believe in love. Because love is the only thing that makes survival worthwhile. Part 7. When Elon reflects on everything, on the late nights of doubt, on the mornings of regret, on the empty houses that once held promises, he no longer speaks with bitterness. He speaks with clarity. The past no longer feels like a weight pressing down on him. It feels like a teacher, one that guided him through storms he didn't believe he could survive. He remembers each of his 3 divorces not as failures but as seasons. Seasons that began with spring's bright bloom, flourished in the warmth of summer, struggled in the coolness of autumn, and eventually surrendered to winter's silence. Each season ended, yes, but the end of one season is also the beginning of another. And in that rhythm, he sees life itself. What he has learned most of all is that love is not about permanence, it is about presence. Love is alive only when it is nurtured, only when 2 people choose it daily. Without that choice, even the strongest bond weakens. But with that choice, even the most fragile connection can flourish. He leans forward as if speaking directly to those who have walked through heartbreak: you survived. And that matters. Because survival is the first step to something greater, renewal. Survival alone is not the goal. To simply survive is to live half asleep, always looking backward. Renewal, however, is about turning the page, writing new chapters, and daring to love again, even with the scars of the past. He admits that for a long time, he was afraid to love again. Afraid of repeating the same pain, of stepping into the same mistakes. But he also realized something: fear never protects you. Fear only prevents you from experiencing the fullness of life. Love may break you, yes, but it may also heal you in ways nothing else can. And so he decided not to let fear dictate his future. He decided that every risk of heartbreak is worth the chance of connection. Because connection, real, deep, soul-anchored connection, is the closest thing to magic humanity will ever know. He smiles as he says this, as though even after everything, hope has found a permanent home inside him. He also learned to set boundaries, not walls, but boundaries. Walls keep love out, boundaries allow love to flow in without drowning you. Boundaries are the lessons carved from pain, the wisdom learned from survival. And with them, he no longer enters relationships blindly. He enters with open eyes, but still with an open heart. There is a kind of strength in that balance. The strength to say no when something isn't right, but also the strength to say yes when love calls again. Elon also shares that part of healing is forgiveness. Forgiveness of his partners, yes, but also forgiveness of himself. For years, he carried guilt, guilt for the moments he was absent, guilt for the arguments that ended in slammed doors, guilt for not being able to hold love together despite all his effort. But guilt, he realized, is a chain that keeps you bound to the past. Forgiveness is the key that releases you into the future. He says quietly, I had to forgive myself for being human. For not being perfect. For trying and failing, but still trying. Those words carry weight, because they touch on something universal. We all stumble. We all break. We all fall short of our own ideals. But forgiveness allows us to rise again, not as flawless beings, but as wiser, softer, more authentic versions of ourselves. In the stillness of his reflection, Elon speaks of something even more profound, the role of gratitude. Gratitude not just for the joys of love, but for the pain as well. Pain revealed his depths, tested his endurance, and expanded his compassion. Without it, he would not be the man he is today. This gratitude transforms everything. Instead of looking back at his divorces with regret, he now looks back with respect. Respect for the journey, respect for the lessons, respect for the resilience it awakened in him. And now, when he looks toward the future, he does not see emptiness. He sees possibility. He sees a horizon where love may come again, not as a rescue, not as a cure, but as a companion to the life he is already building. He imagines a love built not on desperation but on choice. A love where two people stand whole and choose to walk together, not because they need each other to survive, but because they want each other to thrive. That is the love he now believes in. And even if it comes later, even if it comes unexpectedly, he is ready. Because readiness is not about timing, it is about heart. And his heart, though scarred, beats stronger than ever. He closes his reflection with words that echo like a prayer, a vow, and a blessing all at once. I survived 3 divorces. I survived heartbreak that felt like it would end me. And yet here I am, not broken, but alive. Not bitter, but hopeful. Not afraid, but open. That is what I've learned about love. Love is not about never falling, it's about always rising. And no matter what, I will always rise. The camera lingers on him in silence. A silence not of emptiness, but of completion. The kind of silence that lets the message sink deep into the marrow of those listening. And then, in his final act of humility, he offers his listeners one last reminder: if you wish to express your support further, you have the option to give super thanks, with contributions of up to $20. The story ends not with a conclusion, but with a continuation. Because love, after all, never truly ends, it only begins again, in new ways, in new hearts, in new chapters yet to be written.